What if I told you that One Piece, the world's best-selling manga series with over 1,000 episodes and over 100 manga volumes under its belt, has actually struggled to find its footing in the United States? I know it might be hard to believe, but despite the anime and manga giant known as One Piece having been around for over a quarter decade now, only fairly recently has it even began to catch on in the USA and other English-speaking countries. One Piece's journey to mainstream acceptance in English-speaking territories has always fascinated me, and I would love to tell you how it went from underdog to king in the matter of 2 decades. But first, we need to start from the very beginning, back when things were admittedly pretty rough. This is part 1 of One Piece's history in the United States. Before I get started, I just want to take a moment to thank my channel members. This video shout out goes to Ard Hammond. Ard, thank you so much for always supporting me and having my back, dude. I really appreciate you. And if you'd like to have your name featured here and have a possible shout out, please consider becoming a member by hitting the join button. The support means a lot and it allows me to keep creating content. And without further ado, let's get back to the video. To begin, we gotta rewind the clock just a bit here to 2002. Anime was still in its overall infancy in the US, but Pokemon, Dragon Ball Z, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Had found incredible success. It was clear that anime's popularity was on the rise, much to the dismay of some wary parents, but seeing as its popularity only continued to grow thanks to TV blocks like Toonami, the push for anime in the West continued in many ways, and this even extended to manga as well. At the end of 2002, Viz Media, an anime and manga localizing company, published their first English monthly issue of Shonen Jump, which is based on Weekly Shonen Jump, which has been running since 1968 in Japan. In this premiere issue, there were a handful of manga featured, including Dragon Ball, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Yu Yu Hakusho, Sandland, and One Piece. With its first chapter published, the One Piece manga, and One Piece in general, has officially debuted in the United States. Shonen Jump would continue, with One Piece getting a few chapters published each month in the magazine alongside titles new and old. In June 2003, the first 8 chapters of One Piece were compiled and published as a tankobon, or volume, with each subsequent volume being published once every few months. At about this time, Dragon Ball Z was finishing its run on Cartoon Network, and the folks at Toonami were looking for the next big series to take its place. Sure, there was always Dragon Ball GT, but even then that was never really as popular as Dragon Ball Z, even in Japan. And its episode count was cut significantly shorter when it was first localized by Funimation. So, what was next? The Toonami folks were definitely aware of big anime on the horizon that they could potentially air, such as Naruto and One Piece, which were both relatively new and incredibly popular in Japan. But in order for them to air on Cartoon Network's Toonami, these shows needed to be successfully licensed and dubbed into English first. In One Piece's early years, it was being shopped around to various North American companies for localization, such as Funimation and Ocean Productions, with tests being produced for each. However, it wasn't until the fateful day of June 8, 2004 that we would finally find out who acquired the license for One Piece. It was 4Kids Entertainment. The same 4Kids that dubbed Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Sonic X, and more. Surely you've heard of at least one of those popular titles, right? One Piece was set to air on 4Kids' block, the Fox Box, in the fall of that very same year. With anime on the rise in the US, it was a good thing that One Piece's anime finally got licensed, right? The answer to that is incredibly nuanced and very complicated. Many companies have tried to bring anime over to the US for a long time now, but had a difficult time airing it without strict rules in place which required changes to be made to each show in order for it to be appropriate, especially if it were to air on syndication. You see, remember how I said anime had a hard time finding its footing in the US until about the late 90s and early 2000s? Many companies have tried to bring anime over to the US for a long while now, but usually they had a difficult time airing it due to strict broadcast rules, especially if it were to air on syndication. Changes would require content that the network deemed inappropriate to be cut, often resulting in censoring and omitting episodes. Dubbing companies would often take some liberties with the material, such as changing the music in favor of their own in-house score, and rewriting the script and changing names to make it more Western-friendly. These were compromises that were ultimately necessary in the 90s to get anime on the air and give it the boost it needed to eventually earn its spot on cable TV, which would later open the door for many newer anime. But hey, that's how it used to be, and obviously lots of things changed since the 90s. I mean, at this point in the early 2000s, anime didn't have that same uphill climb that it once had. But what does that have to do with 4Kids and One Piece? 4Kids Entertainment had gained a reputation in the anime community at the time for being one of the worst, if not the worst, company that licensed anime. It wasn't just bare minimum stuff, no. There were cut episodes, script changes, music replacements, name changes, and more. Not one show was left untouched. So, when people who knew better saw that One Piece was picked up by 4Kids, it was an awful omen. But maybe the fans were wrong this time. Maybe 4Kids would surprise them, and One Piece would be the exception, and it wouldn't be butchered to an unsettling degree. I mean, that wasn't that much to ask for, right? Well, shortly after, at a licensing convention, 4Kids showed off their localized theme song for One Piece, which was an English version of We Are, the first opening to the original Japanese version. Now, the lyrics weren't a proper translation of the original Japanese, but it was really fun, and it had a nice flow to it. Unfortunately, only a low-quality camera recording exists of this footage, but hey, it was 2004, so I mean, we were lucky enough to get it as it was, right? Actually, shameless plug here, if you're interested in a higher quality version, I uploaded a fan dub that I worked on with Dave Does Music over on my Mugimallard channel, so go check that out if you want. So anyway, alright, they retained the original Japanese opening. That's not just unprecedented for 4Kids, but it was also a good sign that they would be keeping the show as faithful to the original Japanese version as possible. As for the music, best case scenario, they would keep 100% of the Japanese music, and worst case scenario could be they would use the Japanese soundtrack sometimes, alongside in-house music, like in their Pokemon dub. Either way, the worst case scenario was certainly a step up from the treatment that their other dubs got. But this simply put fans into a false sense of security, as nobody really knew for certain what would happen until it aired in the fall of 2004. One Piece would finally make its debut on the Fox Box on September 18th, 2004. And remember that worst case scenario I just mentioned, where I thought it would probably be that they'd take some of the Japanese music and make only some in-house music? Well, that isn't what happened. Nowhere near close to it. 4Kids had opted to scrap their English adaptation of the Japanese opening for a new rap song, and all of the background music was replaced. The script was also heavily changed, and names and terminology were also altered. But the worst was yet to come. Oh, and speaking of names, the most notorious name change was Zoro being changed to Zolo. People say it was to avoid legal trouble with Zoro the Swordsman, but I seriously doubt that. At about this time, Viz Media, who was printing the One Piece manga, was only about 4 volumes in, so because they weren't too far in, they went back and permanently changed Zoro's name to Zolo to match the 4Kids dub, and any reprints of volumes 1 to 4 after that would say Zolo instead of Zoro. This is still in effect to this day. Anyway, as the 4Kids dub of One Piece went on, there would be a ton of cut content. Important scenes, episodes, arcs even. Fans that knew better knew that if this dub were to continue on, it would eventually write itself into a corner with the material that it cut. The Little Garden section of the story was the biggest arc that was cut, which would unfortunately complicate things further down the line as well, like in Enies Lobby and Egghead, where the giants are integral to the story, and of course Elbaf. There was no way that 4Kids would know all that though. I mean, even when Laboon was cut out of the story, Thriller Bark didn't even exist in Japan yet. 4Kids treated One Piece like they would any other anime, so they cut whatever they felt like they could. A popular theory at the time was 4Kids realized that the show was struggling, so they trimmed some fat to get to Chopper faster. Or it could be because Nami's shirt burnt off and we saw her bra. Nah, it's probably to get to Chopper faster, the series mascot. Yeah, that ought to save One Piece. This is about the time I properly got into One Piece. I'd seen it on the Fox Box before whenever I watched Sonic X. I thought it looked awful and sounded awful. It wasn't appealing in the slightest, and I thought it was pretty easy to turn that garbage off. Me, being the kid I was, I went online and I talked shit, because I was aware that people didn't really like 4Kids. Despite that, I didn't know how much of what I saw of One Piece was actually ruined by 4Kids. Actually, you know what? I didn't care. I thought One Piece was stupid. In 2005, Toonami began airing 4Kids' One Piece dub, as is from its Foxbox broadcast, with all of its Saturday morning edits airing on Saturday nights. And I would talk about it online with friends on a forum dedicated to Sonic X's Japanese version. And then I was told by older fans that I should actually give One Piece a shot because its English dub is far from a proper representation of its Japanese version. Alright, so I caved. I torrented a bunch of Japanese episodes and yeah, they were right. One Piece's Japanese version was nothing like what I'd seen on the Foxbox. I felt really stupid for judging it the way that I did. I managed to catch up to the anime pretty quickly, and I caught up when the anime was at Water 7. Funny thing is, I thought that was a lot of episodes at the time, 200 something, but I was hooked. I also got caught up with the manga shortly afterwards too. Now that I was a fan, I wanted to get whatever I could of One Piece. That included the manga, and video games were just starting to come out. One Piece Grand Battle, the very first localized game in English, was released in September 2005 for the GameCube and PlayStation 2. It was a fun little game, even though I kinda had to mute the TV sometimes to play it. So yeah, even though the dub was not good, One Piece seemed to be doing good enough at the time to at least get video games and even a card game. But you know what else premiered at that very same time and year? Naruto. I had watched Naruto subtitled in Japanese before its English dub came out, and I was seriously impressed with how faithful the English dub was to the original Japanese version from the get-go. I mean, if Naruto could have that, why couldn't One Piece? But Toonami was still airing the 4Kids dub of One Piece with no signs of stopping. To make things worse, at school and online, One Piece had a terrible reputation due to the 4Kids dub. People basically thought the same thing I did when I initially judged it. It looked stupid and it sounded stupid. They would much rather watch the more mature show, Naruto. And even if you told them that the One Piece dub was bad, nobody really understood what the fuck you were talking about. Anime wasn't mainstream at the time, so watching it subtitled in Japanese was something that American anime fans weren't exactly familiar with. One Piece, at the time, was an incredibly hard sell to the casual anime fan. And the casual audience is what it needed to succeed. One Piece continued to air on Toonami, and its popularity, or what little it had left, would just continue to decline. And then, on February 11th, 2006, One Piece had mysteriously disappeared from the 4Kids TV block on Saturday mornings, and then it would just air exclusively on Toonami from there on out. At that point, it was at about episode 91 of the original anime, and I think 59 of the 4Kids dub. Yeah, and at this point, 32 episodes worth of content from the original was simply omitted. One Piece continued to air throughout 2006. However, in the UK, the English dub broadcast would slip ahead of the American one, and they would reach episode 104 of the 4Kids dub, or episode 143 of the original. And then it just stopped, and nobody knew why. Toonami in the US was still working its way through that batch of episodes, so only time would tell what would happen once they reached that point. After some radio silence, someone later on in the year got in contact with a representative at 4Kids, and on December 6, 2006, it was announced that 4Kids had dropped One Piece and they were no longer going to license it anymore, with the show ending right after the Alabasta and Rainbow Mist arcs. It seemed like the writing was on the wall for a couple months at this point, but until 4Kids confirmed it, nobody really knew for sure. Especially since, in August 2006, the video game One Piece Grand Adventure was released, and content that reached Skypiea was retained. Characters from that arc were given voices that never appeared in the 4Kids dub, such as Bellamy, Blackbeard, and Enel, or Eneru. And up until this point, the One Piece video games would remove characters and content that covered material that the dub had yet to reach. So, while nobody can say for sure, I personally believe that the 4Kids dub continuing on into Skypiea was almost a reality. So, what now that the show was officially over? Would 4Kids start over and make a brand new, uncut dub? Or would another company pick it up instead? Or would 4Kids just sit on the license until it expired? The truth is, 4Kids never planned to release an uncut version, so we weren't sure if another company would either. Toonami would continue airing what it had left of the show, and some fans, including myself, were hopeful that another company like Funimation or Viz would pick it up and make a more faithful dub. Thankfully, we would get our answer a few months later. So, at this point in time, the One Piece anime license in North America is in limbo hell. Next time, we'll dive into how Funimation acquired the license, and what it was like waiting for it to finally premiere on Cartoon Network, along with the many twists and turns that the dub would take from that point on. There's still so much more left to tell, but until next time, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss it. Matane!